Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Gambhir. Our cover story tonight is about the Davos hypocrites. As you may be aware by now, Davos hosts the annual World Economic Forum meeting. But tonight, we tell you how the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. We expose the glaring wealth divide that raises a number of crucial questions about where things are headed. Also on the show for you tonight, as tensions continue to escalate, we tell you all about the Red Sea maritime meltdown as we get to the latest. On Gravitas Snapshot, we get to the story of the rise of Taiwan's new president. Flight disruptions as a result of the dense fog at Delhi airport resulted in one passenger hitting a pilot over his flight's delay. We also tell you why the Chinese are rushing to buy decades-old calendars. And for our cover story, we are exposing the hypocrites of Davos as political and business leaders gather this week for the annual World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, Switzerland. Nothing can be more glaring than the self-serving nature of this gathering. Because while the global elite discuss combating challenges facing the world economy, the rich are getting richer and the poorer are getting poorer. Let me explain. According to Oxfam, the combined fortunes of the world's 5 richest men have more than doubled to $869 since 2020. Meanwhile, $5 billion 5 million people have been made poorer. Have you ever heard of the saying, this meeting could have been an email? Well, nothing epitomizes this more than this conclave of pretend do-gooders. You see, each year, political and business leaders fly their carbon-spewing jets to Davos, stay in lavish accommodations in the Swiss town, and from here, they give out sermons on how to fix poverty, fight climate change. I mean, these are some of the wealthiest people and leaders of the world. If they could have solved the problem, they would have. But you see, they have failed. And that is why ordinary citizens protest, calling on the governments to rein in the billionaire class. Quite frankly, the meeting at Davos is a performance, a mere spectacle to mask the dangerous wealth divide. Just have a look at the figures on your screen now. The Oxfam study is perfectly timed. Since 2020, the wealthiest people on earth became a whole lot richer. We'll get to those figures on your screen in a bit. The net worth of these 5 billionaires skyrocketed 114%. If the current trends continue, they would become trillionaires in a decade. Just contrast this with the condition of the poor. Nearly 5 billion people became poorer. Why is that? Because they had to contend with inflation, war, the climate crisis. Do you know how much time it would take to eliminate poverty? 230 years. But who are these 5 individuals who have seen rising fortunes? Let's tell you all about them. Elon Musk, who runs several companies, including Tesla and SpaceX, was the big winner. His wealth increased to $245.5 billion at the end of November. In short, he saw over 700% increase in wealth since March 2020, and this after accounting for inflation. Next, we have Bernard Arnault, the chairman of French luxury goods giant LVMH. He had a net worth of $191.3 billion, up 111%. And then you have Jeff Bezos. He saw a rise in the fortune of $167.4 billion, a 24% increase. Bezos was followed by Oracle founder Larry Ellison. His wealth totaled $145.5 billion, up by 107%. And rounding off the list is Warren Buffett, the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. His net worth rose 48% to $119.2 billion. Now, if you thought that was shocking, listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you next. The Oxfam report says that if each of the 5 wealthiest men were to spend $1 million daily, they would take 476 years to exhaust their combined wealth. Now, this is why you should care. 7 out of 10 of the world's biggest corporations have a billionaire CEO or a billionaire as their principal shareholder. In short, the world's richest 1%. Well, they own 43% of all global financial assets, including stocks, shares, bonds, plus stakes in privately held businesses. What's more, this 1% emits as much carbon pollution as the poorest 2/3 of humanity. Billionaires today are $3.3 billion richer than they were in the year 2020. Let that sink in. And this, by the way, is despite the many crises that have devastated the world in the past few years. And who is to blame for this, you wonder? Oxfam says government leaders. This is how. States handed power over to monopolies, allowing corporations to influence the wages that you are paid, the price you pay for food, the kind of medicines that you have access to. It's the same leaders who are now huddling at Davos to discuss how to combat the myriad challenges facing the world. And this, perhaps, is why Oxfam called for governments to rein in corporate power, to break up monopolies. Further, Oxfam urged the governments to tax the rich, to institute taxes for those who have excess profit and wealth, to promote alternatives to shareholder control, such as forms of employee ownership. This is because of estimated 148 top corporations that made $1.8 trillion in profits. The rich shareholders received hefty payouts. This, even as millions of workers faced a cost of living crisis amid inflation-driven wage cuts. Now, make no mistake here, this inequality is not by accident. The rich want to keep you poor. They are ensuring that corporations deliver more wealth to them at the expense of everyone else. But let's just get back to Davos. The World Economic Forum says that the Davos events were launched to champion stakeholder capitalism. What does that mean? The WEF says that it defines a corporation as being not just about maximizing profits, but also about fulfilling human and societal aspirations as part of the broader social system. But is it possible in a world full of self-serving status seekers? Oxfam looked at data sources from International Labour Organization, from the World Bank, from the annual Forbes Rich List. It shows that these big goals were far from being fulfilled. What we know for sure is this: as long as the ultra-rich continue to focus on profit rather than sustainability, inequality and climate change will continue to scar the poor. The gathering at Davos, therefore, is only idle talk to mask the dangerous wealth divide. And now, while the melting ice caps are a growing concern the world over, a bigger concern is the obsession of the ultra-rich with luxury ice from the Arctic glaciers. At least that is what Arctic Ice, a startup based in Greenland, is hoping to achieve. The name of this company is Arctic Ice, and they are not selling just any ice. They are selling what they call the purest ice in the world. How? Well, by harvesting it directly from the rapidly melting glaciers of Greenland. But this is not for ordinary people, you see. It's a luxury for the privileged few, for the elite of the society. This company aims to sell this glacier ice to upscale cocktail bars in Dubai I mean, if you are truly among the world's elite, you can just not have a drink with any ice. You must drink it, it seems, with the purest ice in the world. The company claims that the impact of their venture on the environment is very insignificant. They say that their ice is harvested from icebergs that are already naturally detached from the glacier. It is then shipped, still frozen, on cargo vessels to distribution partner in Dubai. The cost for a high-end bar to acquire a piece of this glacier ice is unclear. Netizens, meanwhile, are furious. They have raised environmental sustainability concerns given the impact of the climate crisis on Greenland's iconic glaciers. There is no comment yet from the company on that criticism, but here's hoping the message gets out there. Let's now shift our focus to the Maldives, where the China game plan has kicked in. Its pro-Beijing President Mohammad Moizu has just wrapped up his 5-day visit to China, and just a day after returning, his office has brazenly issued an ultimatum to India. A March 15 deadline to withdraw its small number of military personnel from the country. In a press briefing, Maldives' Public Policy Secretary at the President's office, Abdullah Nazim Ibrahim, has said, and I'm quoting, Indian military personnel cannot stay in the Maldives. This is the policy of President Mohammad Moizu and that of his administration. A high-level core group was tasked with negotiating the withdrawal of the troops. On Sunday morning, they held their first meeting at the Foreign Ministry headquarters in Mali. It was attended by the Indian High Commissioner, Monu Mahavar. And in response, India's foreign ministry said that both sides held discussions on wide-ranging issues. The Indian government said discussions were related to bilateral cooperation towards identifying steps to enhance the partnership, and it included expediting the implementation of the ongoing development cooperation projects. India's External Affairs Ministry has said, and I'm quoting, both sides also held discussions on finding mutually workable solutions to enable continued operation of the Indian aviation platforms that provide humanitarian and medvac services to the people of the Maldives. It was agreed to hold the next meeting of the high-level core group in India on a mutually convenient date. But Moizu's ultimatum is not surprising, especially as it comes after his big China visit. You see, soon after taking oath as the president of the Maldives in November last year, pro-China Moizu got to work. He was quick to formally ask India to withdraw its military personnel from his country. He said that the Maldivian people have given him a strong mandate to make this request to New Delhi. Now, for the unversed, yes, India, Maldives' traditional ally, has servicemen in the country. In fact, Indian servicemen in the Maldives maintain and operate 2 helicopters and a Dornier 228 aircraft gifted by New Delhi to the Maldives for humanitarian and search and rescue missions. Beyond its defense ties with the Maldives, India has been instrumental in the socio-economic development. Not only that, New Delhi has sent vaccines, medicines and other aid to the country. During emergencies, India is also building the most ambitious bridge project, in fact. And during his just concluded state visit to China, Moizu sought to align the Maldives closer to Beijing. Speaking to the press after returning from China, he indirectly attacked India. Without naming any country, he said, "We may be small, but that does not give you the license to bully us." This request for the withdrawal of Indian troops comes at a time of diplomatic row between the two sides. The row, remember, was triggered after some ministers under the Moizu government posted derogatory comments against the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and against Indians in general. It stirred a controversy. Calls for a boycott by Indian tourists were also made. They, by the way, rank the highest in numbers to the Indian Ocean archipelago. Clearly working under the Chinese influence, The Maldives under the Muizu government is hell-bent on promoting Beijing at the cost of India and ruining the years of steady ties it has made with New Delhi. But the question is, does he really have the support of his people? Well, it does not look like it. In a big setback to President Muizu, pro-India opposition Maldivian Democratic Party or MDP has secured a landslide victory in the capital Male's mayoral election. On Saturday, the MDP candidate Adam Azim was elected as the new mayor of Male. This was a post held by Muizu until recently. In fact, Muizu resigned from the post to contest the presidential elections last year. The Maldivian media reported Azim's win as a landslide and hailed his victory by a large margin. The MDP is headed by pro-India former President Mohammad Soleh, who was defeated, remember, by Muizu. Now, this is big. The mayoral election victory is expected to revive the political fortunes of the MDP. It still holds a majority in the parliament. And if you thought this was an indication of the dissent that Muizu is facing at home for his choices, let me just share some more. On Monday, Maldives' parliamentary minority leader Ali Azim also called for the removal of Muizu from the president's post. He has called for a vote of no confidence in the Muizu government. He emphasized on the stability of the country's foreign policy. He said, and I'm quoting, "We, the Democrats, are dedicated to upholding the stability of the nation's foreign policy and preventing the isolation of any neighboring country. Are you willing to take all necessary steps to remove President Muizu from power? Is the MDP Secretariat prepared to initiate a vote of no confidence?" All this just tells us one thing. Muizu may be flying in Beijing's toxic cloud for now, but it seems he is losing the ground under his feet in the Maldives. Our next story is from the Red Sea. It has been 30 days and tensions in this critical waterway refuse to die down. The Houthis are still on a rampage. They continue to attack cargo ships, forcing shipping giants to reroute their vessels and invariably disrupt the global flow of trade. The US and allies are taking countermeasures, but their actions are far from dialing the tensions down. Let's just take a look at what unfolded in the last 24 hours and what impact it will have on shipping and global trade in the days ahead. Now, to start with, on Sunday, the Houthis fired an anti-ship cruise missile towards an American destroyer. Fortunately, a US fighter jet shot the missile down before it could hit its target. This attack was the first reaction from the Houthis since the US and the UK launched strikes against their launch sites in Yemen. Now remember, just last week, American and British warplanes launched dozens of airstrikes across Yemen, and these strikes were in retaliation to months of attacks on Red Sea shipping. On your screen are satellite images, in fact, of the damage that was inflicted on airports and other structures following the strikes. And immediately after the attacks, there was uproar in Yemen. Tens of thousands of Yemeni citizens gathered in cities across the country protesting against the US-led airstrikes. They waved Palestinian flags and condemned America's actions. As the protests were underway, the Houthis also released this video. It showed the group holding military exercises, including mortar launches. Houthi leaders, meanwhile, threatened a strong and effective response against the US. Listen to this.
From this majestic field, we renew our pledge and loyalty to the commander. May God protect him to remain loyal and true to his directives, listening and obedient. And when meeting the enemy, we are steadfast. We are ready to sacrifice, and we long for martyrdom. We in the 6th Military Zone assure our dear people and the free Arab and Islamic nation of our readiness to fight the battle of the promised conquest and holy jihad with America and Israel.
Have the US and the UK responded to these threats? Yes, they have. In fact, speaking to reporters in Pennsylvania, US President Joe Biden called the strikes a message to Iran. He added that these strikes will continue if the Houthis continue their outrageous behavior.
I've already delivered the message to Iran. They know we're not to do anything. We will make sure that we respond to the Houthis if they continue this outrageous behavior.
In the UK, the British Foreign Minister David Cameron has also responded. He called the Houthi strikes unacceptable, illegal and dangerous. He said the strikes were limited and proportionate, but they were very much needed.
What I want to be absolutely clear about was that what was happening was unacceptable, that military action should always be the last resort. But since the 19th of November, we have had 26 attacks on ships. Freedom of navigation really matters. It's not just the goods that are coming to this country, the dangers of our economy being dislocated. It's also, grain ships on their way to Ethiopia and Sudan to feed some of the poorest and hungriest people in the world. This really matters.
And guess who else has issued a statement on the Red Sea meltdown? China. You see, the Chinese foreign minister was in Egypt recently, and during the visit, he said both Egypt and China are following developments in the Red Sea very closely. In fact, he expressed concern over the expansion of the conflict in the region and added that the priority right now should be on ensuring the safety and security of navigation.
The situation in the Red Sea has escalated sharply recently, and China is deeply concerned about this. The waters of the Red Sea are an important international trade channel for goods and energy. China calls for a halt to the harassment and attacks on civilian ships and for the maintenance of the smooth flow of global industrial and supply chains and the international trade order.
You saw what happened. You heard the responses. Let's now discuss what comes next. What efforts are being taken to bring down the tensions? To start with, Qatar Energy, one of the world's largest exporters of liquefied natural gas, has stopped sending tankers via the Red Sea. It has done so to get security advice from other countries. Production, however, has not been halted. Qatar may be the first country to officially take this decision. But you see, others are also making similar moves. They are rerouting their ships away from the Red Sea to a longer route across the African coastline. And this, by the way, will not only increase time and the consumption of fuel, but also have a severe impact on global trade. The outcome could be inflation in several countries. I'm not the one saying this. Leading economists are. They say that due to the Red Sea meltdown, inflation is at the risk of rising again. And this would essentially push the prices up globally and impact the economic growth of several countries. They say shock is not going to be huge, but it will still be unfortunate. And the second big impact will be on the oil prices. As it is, they have experienced a significant surge. Over the weekend, global benchmark Brent briefly topped $80 a barrel, marking a 4.3% increase. And observers say this could get worse in the days ahead. And the third big outcome could be a full-blown war. You see, as the Houthis continue their attacks and the US strikes Houthi targets, there are fears that other parties also might get involved soon, like the Iran-backed Hezbollah group. The assessment is not misplaced. The Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has already warned that the US has made a grave mistake and they may not be prepared for what's about to come. I'll wrap with this.
The more dangerous thing is what the Americans did in the Red Sea will harm all maritime navigation, even the ships that are not going to Palestine, even the ships which are not Israeli, even the ships that have nothing to do with the matter, because the sea has become a theater of fighting, missiles, drones and warships. Security has been disrupted. If there was a percentage of 95% security for the international maritime navigation in the Red Sea, these arrogant fools have destroyed it.
And we are not done with the story yet. The Prime Minister of the UK, Rishi Sunak, is briefing the British Parliament about the strikes on the Houthi targets in Yemen. Take a look.
Necessary and proportionate response to a direct threat to UK vessels and therefore to the UK itself. And Mr. Speaker, let me be absolutely clear why the Royal Navy is in the Red Sea. They are there as part of Operation Prosperity Guardian, protecting freedom of navigation as a fundamental tenet of international law. The Houthis' attack on international shipping have put innocent lives at risk. They have held one crew hostage for almost 2 months, and they are causing growing economic disruption. Global commerce cannot operate under such conditions. Containers and tankers are having to take a 5,000-mile detour around the Cape of Good Hope. That pushes up prices and imperils the passage of goods, foods and medicines that the British people and others rely on. We have attempted to resolve this through diplomacy. After numerous international calls for the attacks to stop, a coalition of countries gave the Houthis a clear and unambiguous warning 2 weeks ago. Last week, the UN Security Council passed a resolution condemning the attacks and highlighting the right of nations to defend their vessels and preserve freedom of navigation. Yet, the Houthis continued on their reckless path. Mr. Speaker, we shouldn't fall for their malign narrative that this is about Israel and Gaza. They target ships from around the world. We continue to work towards a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza and to get more aid to civilians. We also continue to support a negotiated settlement in Yemen's civil war. But I want to be very clear that this action is completely unrelated to those issues. It is a direct response to the Houthis' attacks on international shipping. And we should also recognise the risks of inaction. It would weaken international security and the rule of law, further damage freedom of navigation in the global economy, and send a dangerous message that British vessels and British interests are fair game. And there is another point here, which is often overlooked. The Houthis' attack risks worsening the dire humanitarian situation in Yemen itself. The UK helps to feed around 100,000 Yemenis every month, with aid arriving via the very sea routes that the Houthis have in their sights. So, Mr. Speaker, the threats to shipping must cease. Illegally detained vessels and crews must be released, and we remain prepared to back our words with actions.
Is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu losing President Biden's favor? Well, it sure looks like that. The war just hit the 100-day mark. The end seems nowhere in sight. And what's worse, Netanyahu's biggest ally, Biden, is running out of patience. Have a look at this Axios report. It says Biden is becoming increasingly frustrated with Netanyahu. When the war broke out, the two leaders used to talk almost every other day. This went on for a good 2 months. But now Biden has not called Netanyahu in the last 20 days. And why is that? What did Bibi do to upset his friend? Well, he is busy being stubborn. He has been rejecting most of the American administration's war-related requests. His last phone call with Biden happened on the 23rd of December. And the American president got so frustrated that he hung up by saying that this conversation is over. What could have happened that annoyed Biden that much? What were the two leaders talking about? Let me tell you. President Biden had requested Netanyahu to release the Palestinian tax revenues that Israel has been withholding. For those unversed, Israel and Palestine have an agreement. The Israeli government collects tax on behalf of the Palestinian Authority. This is for the Palestinian imports and exports. And how much money are we talking about? Roughly $188 million every month. It is the main source of income for the Palestinian Authority, in fact. Israel, in return, earns a commission of 3%. But since the war started, the Israeli government has been withholding the Gaza Strip's share in this revenue, and the Palestinian Authority refuses to accept it after the deductions. The US tried to convince Israel to release the revenue, but Netanyahu has firmly rejected that. The National Security Council spokesperson, John Kirby, has been trying to downplay the entire situation. He says the decreased talks indicate nothing about the state of the relationship. But there are many other signs of irritation. The main one is Netanyahu's resistance to requests that are American priorities. Other than that, there are humanitarian concerns. Biden and his advisors believe that Israel is not doing enough to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. The US has been urging Israel to cut down civilian casualties, but Israel does not seem to be listening. The US also wants Israel to transition to low-intensity operations in Gaza by the end of this month. American officials have been pressing for this in hopes of reducing Palestinian casualties, but seeing the situation in Gaza, that is not happening either. What else? Prime Minister Netanyahu does not have a plan for what happens after the war, and when the US came up with one, he rejected it. American officials proposed that a reformed Palestinian Authority should have a role in post-Hamas Gaza. But Netanyahu is not on board with this. In fact, reports say the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken stressed that Israel's post-war plan is a pie in the sky. He also pointed out that no Arab country is going to support Israel in running Gaza if it leaves the Palestinian authorities out. But Israel is as stubborn as ever. And given all this, is it becoming difficult for Biden to continue his unbridled support? Is he running out of patience with Netanyahu? And it's not just Netanyahu's foreign allies, it's also his supporters at home who are losing trust. There seems to be a rift in his cabinet. His coalition is bickering over passing an amended budget and over the fate of Gaza. Yesterday's government meeting quickly descended into a circus. Cabinet members traded insults. The education minister, Yoav Kish of Netanyahu's Likud party, stormed out of the room in rage. The security cabinet meeting held early in the month was also ill-tempered. A day after plan for Gaza was being discussed, but it exposed the stark differences and underlying divide between the parties. Ministers rounded on each other after 3 hours of confrontation, exchanges, insults, and ministers swearing at each other. Netanyahu had to break up the cabinet meeting. And despite the increasing US pressure, no viable plan came out. You see, it's a double blow for Netanyahu. At home, his ministers are brawling, and abroad, President Biden is upset. How long does he have before things boil over? Taiwan has elected its new president. His name is Lai Ching-te. People also know him as William Lai. For the last 4 years, he was the island's vice president, and now he has ascended to presidency, keeping the Democratic Progressive Party in power. Upon him lies the fate of Taiwan, at least for the next few years. So who is this man? What is his story? How did he rise to power from poverty? Let's just go back in time. The year was 1959. Lai was born in a rural coastal town of Wanli. Both his parents worked in a coal mine. The income was meager, but there were 6 kids to feed, and the youngest of them was Lai. He was all of 3 months when a tragedy happened. His father, Lai Chao-jin, was working in the mine. He was some 300 feet underground. Suddenly, gas leaked out of the pit. There was no odor, there was no sound. The explosion came out of nowhere. Lai's father did not survive. His mother was left alone with the kids, and she raised all 6 of them on her own. She continued to work. She's recharged the bulky batteries that powered the lamps on the miners' helmets. She operated the cables that pulled out the carts of coal. The poor woman had one goal: to keep her children in school. Lai also did his part. He excelled in school, and unlike most miners' children, he went on to study in a university. He became a doctor, also received a master's degree from Harvard. Things were looking up for him. But Taiwan was in turmoil. The island was slowly transitioning from dictatorship to democracy. Naturally, China was not happy. It was the year 1996. Taiwan was going to have its first free presidential election. But just ahead of the polls, the dragon fired missiles into the waters of the island's coast. Lai was a fresh-faced doctor at a university hospital at that time. For him, the missile crisis was a turning point. He hung up his white coat and decided to enter politics. First, he became a legislator representing the Tainan city, not just once, but for 4 consecutive terms. It was during this time that he was beaten up by gangsters, and out of concern, his mother asked him to go back to being a doctor. But Lai was not going to give up. He resisted. And a few years later, he lost his mother as well. But life went on. From legislator, he became a mayor, and then the Prime Minister of Taiwan. In the year 2020, incumbent President Tsai Ing-wen chose Lai as the Vice President. And on Saturday, people of Taiwan chose him as their president. And with that, he has broken the 8-year curse of Taiwan politics. The popular term basically highlights the fact that until Lai's victory, no political party had stayed on in power for more than 2 terms. The president-elect will formally take office in the month of May, and the next 4 months are expected to be difficult for Taiwan, to say the least, because China does not like Lai at all. It sees him as a separatist, in fact. It has repeatedly suggested that Lai will be the one bringing war to Taiwan. Until the very last moment, Beijing was trying to talk Taiwanese voters out of electing Lai, but clearly it did not succeed. And so now it is issuing warnings. China has threatened punishment for any moves towards independence. You see, a few years ago, Lai called himself a worker for Taiwanese independence, and now this worker is in power. What comes next is the question. If you were flying to or out of the Delhi airport over the weekend, I don't need to tell you what things were like. There was chaos as dense fog severely impacted the airport operations on Sunday. And in the midst of all of this, a video of a passenger assaulting a pilot has gone viral. You heard that right. The passenger hit the pilot because he was frustrated over the flight's delay. Our next report getting you the complete story.
These were the scenes at Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport. Hours of delay, chaos, passengers chanting slogans against airlines. What was going on? Frustration had been mounting as a result of flight delays, and some passengers had had enough. The intense fog resulted in several flights arriving at and departing from the Indira Gandhi Airport getting delayed. Thousands of passengers were left waiting for hours, with the fog reducing visibility and impacting flights across northern India. There were chaotic scenes. As tempers flew, things took an exceptionally ugly turn on this flight. A passenger aboard this Indigo Airlines Delhi to Goa flight assaulted the pilot. Here's what happened. The pilot was announcing a further delay in the flight's departure. One of the passengers then ran towards the pilot. and slapped him. One of the flight attendants can be heard in the background telling the passenger that he cannot do this. The passenger has now been arrested. As per reports, the flight took off from Delhi after a delay of more than 10 hours. The Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia said that all stakeholders were working round the clock to minimize the fog-related impact and that unruly passenger behavior is unacceptable and will be dealt with strongly. In a statement, Indigo Airlines has said that the matter had been referred to an independent internal committee for the passengers' inclusion in the no-fly list. Indigo said the passenger was declared unruly and handed over to the local law enforcement agencies for further action as per protocol. While passenger fury has been growing as a result of the fog-induced disruptions, this case has left people shocked. After all, the flight crew personnel were just doing their jobs, with the fog severely impacting airport operations. What could they possibly do? How can assaulting another human being help make the situation better in any way? This incident is an ugly reminder of how passenger behavior cannot be allowed to nosedive, how we all need to be responsible passengers and not let things spiral out of control. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Kentucky is attempting to make cosmic contact. It's known for its music and whiskey. It has an unusual invitation now. It's inviting aliens to visit, but at the same time saying, don't eat us. Now, while the movies often show aliens heading straight for cities like New York or even London, Kentucky's tourism board has other ideas. They are aiming to draw extraterrestrial visitors to Lexington, the horse-obsessed hub of the state and the 30th largest city in the US. And how exactly do they plan on doing this? By sending a welcome signal to TRAPPIST-1, which is a red dwarf star 40 light years away. It is home to the largest group of Earth-sized planets in a single stellar system. This message is not your typical tourist advertisement. It's an interstellar holiday invitation sent straight from Earth. Created by VisitLex, the website for Lexington tourism, it's the first of its kind. The VisitLex team highlights that when the message reaches TRAPPIST-1, its quote-unquote inhabitants will discover a bitmap image showing them the horse capital of the world, complete with wide open spaces perfect for landing a spaceship. The coded image is supposed to have useful information for extraterrestrials like knowledge of the elements of life on Earth, prime numbers, and other education that aliens might need to understand us. Interestingly, the message also includes how to make it the state's famous bourbon. Along with facts about Kentucky and its horses, the VisitLex team shares that aliens will now learn why Lexington has the best food and music on planet Earth. This was conveyed through an audio recording by the legendary blues musician T.D. Young. The message was sent out using a modified infrared laser after getting the green light from the Federal Aviation Administration. But if you are hoping to meet an alien at the Kentucky Derby, hold your horses. The signal will reach TRAPPIST-1 only by 2063. And who knows how long it will take for any extraterrestrial tourist to travel back the 235 trillion miles. But why TRAPPIST-1? For starters, it is a red-hot focus for astronomers, with NASA observing 7 rocky exoplanets orbiting a cool red dwarf star. Several of these planets lie in the habitable zone, a region not too hot, not too cold for liquid water. According to astrobiologist Robert Lauder from the University of Kentucky, they are targeting TRAPPIST-1 because they think they might get an answer in somebody's lifetime. The message, being from Lexington's International Museum of the Horse, is a gesture of peace. So if any extraterrestrials are out there scanning for holiday spots, Lexington might be on their list. Until then, this marketing gimmick might work well for Homo sapien tourists. On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Gambhir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching, leaving you with Gravitas Images.
Just can't help.
Ceremony that is taking place at Balai Pasatapan. And states as well, including Selangor. See now, Their Majesty's way up niya anak istri Anish.
India's Global Voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
As democracy strengthens across the world, elections and their unique cast of leaders, influencers, pollsters, and most of all voters dominate the political space. We bring you a special program that offers insights and reports on the colorful, contentious, and occasionally quirky panorama of elections. Something is always happening somewhere. This is a new special about leaders, their promises, voters and their demands. A show that tells you all about the rules of the race, cutting through the rhetoric to bring you the reality, cutting through the populism to bring out the policy.